Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Film School podcast. Sean, thank you so much for joining me on today's show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. And I was trying to find lots of information about you before this conversation. And if I am correct with my information, your dad kind of influenced you to get creative in the very beginning.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was really lucky. Both my parents were really supportive of me wanting to be, kind of do something that was creative, and then yeah, specifically getting into making movies and cinematography. My dad was a glass artist, and I would like work with him on his projects when I was with
Mm,
him, and then at night we would watch movies, and we would watch like sometimes two or three movies a night. And he was the one who showed me, like from a pretty young age, like Kurosawa, Antonioni, Godard,
mm,
and kind of like opened my eyes to, what cinema could really be. And then, yeah, it got me similar, like one of those digital stills cameras. And I think it was like maybe 30 seconds was the maximum
yeah,
clip it would record. And so I was like, all right, that's what I got. And I think I was using, whatever iMovie came on the
yeah.
laptop that I had at the time and would just make stuff. And kind of went from there and then graduated to like mini DV. That was a lot of like high school and
Yeah.
undergrad. And I remember I worked at a local ABC affiliate in college and they had, was it Panasonics? I think that had like the P2 cards.
Mhm.
And that was the big deal. That was like, oh, now you don't have to sit there and capture. At least you can go in and just like transfer it from the card. You don't have to sit and wait while it rolls through the tape.
Right.
Um, but yeah, no, it was, I mean, yeah, I was really lucky that I like had that opportunity to start kind of messing around with things from such a young age. I mean, I honestly like can't remember a time that I wasn't kind of,
Right.
had a camera and was messing around. So,
Yeah. Not
yeah, it just kind of feels like it's what I've been doing the whole life.
Yeah, I always tell people like that's how I played. Like literally, when I was really little, we had like my friend's dad had his dad was like just one of those dads that just bought cameras for no reason. It's like you don't shoot anything,
Nice.
you don't do.
Yeah.
So it was
Just a
like,
collector.
yeah, it's like every time we get a new one, we'd get an old one. So it's like here's a VHS camera, you can play with that, and then it was like here's a digital camera, and then here's a mini DV, and then waiting for those tapes to like actually all like everything you shot, you had to wait for it to play through to get on your computer to put
Yeah.
into like movie maker. It was really
Hmm.
exciting stuff.
Oh yeah, movie maker. Yeah. That's actually probably what I was using. I forgot.
Yeah, it's not what
But
you're
yeah.
still using, right? You're not still using
No.
movie
Yeah.
maker, you've moved out.
No.
So I know you spent some time in college. You went to USC, did worked quite a bit doing news and all that kind of stuff. Like going to USC, was the goal to be able to shoot anything, or did you have a goal of like, I want to be a director, I want to do this, and then cinematography kind of emerged as like, oh, that's the thing? Like, what was the original path and direction?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, when I was a kid, I just did everything. Like I would write it, direct it, shoot it, edit, did some terrible scores for the shorts as well. Um, and everything except being in front of the camera.
Mm,
I would con people into doing that for me. Um, and then yeah, so that was kind of what I thought the goal was, but I was always more interested in the camera as well.
mhm,
Like that was definitely when I was making those things, kind of talking about blocking and framing and as much lighting as you could do at the time with what I had. That was always kind of the focus. And then as I got to meet other people who wanted to make movies and were better at certain things, then I kind of was more and more behind the camera. And then it
mhm,
was like definitely realizing, oh, like this is where I belong. And, a lot of the jobs I was doing was work in cinematography. So
mhm.
either shooting for local news for a little while in college, and then I was in Atlanta for a bit before I came out to USC, and was shooting like local commercial stuff and things like that, and still doing my own stuff and shooting other
Right.
people's projects and things like that. Um, and then yeah, once I got to USC, it was definitely I kind of knew going in the first semester, kind of everybody even no matter even if you come in with like a specialty that you want to do, they're still like, hey, you're gonna make some films like
Right.
in groups. You do like one kind of on your own, and then you do a few in like these trios. So no matter what, you're gonna do that. And then at that, they're like, okay, now you can go branch off if you would like to and do your specialty.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly, once I got to work with all the great people there who were my collaborators, I was like, oh, okay, like I always kind of had a hint that I was like cinematography was really where I should be. And then
Right.
once you meet all the people, you're like, that's it. Like that's, that's where I should be. And so then it was like full steam ahead, cinematography. So
Right.
it
Right.
was really great clarity there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely curious to ask you about schooling, but I do want to circle back because you said you'd never done anything in front of the camera. Was it because you
Mhm.
were reticent to be in front of the camera and like that seemed like the worst nightmare, or was it something where it just never happened? And
Yeah, not a fan of it. I guess I was in one of my buddies. I was in like one of his things for 2 seconds and
that was two
doing
seconds too many.
yeah. I'm just, I'm better behind the camera.
With USC, I mean, that's kind of like Mecca for aspiring filmmakers. We hear legendary stories of, all these different people, George Lucas, Coppola, like all these people that attended.
Yeah.
And in the, since then, I mean, there's been a lot of debate about like film school. Do you go to college for, do you just pick up the
Hmm.
camera and go?
Yeah.
Looking back retrospectively, like, do you see USC as a pivotal place in your career? Do you look back as like, oh, potentially if I just started working, I would have gone for it? Like,
Hmm.
how do you view film school now? I guess now that you're out of it, through it, and actually, working in the industry.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like really particular to the person. Like I think the thing that was good for me, honestly, was just meeting all the people that I still work with now. Like it was a great experience. They were great professors. The classes were good, but for me, it was just meeting all these people, and really, like so many of them, I do still work with.
Hmm.
And then, I know them, and then they know people. It just creates this network. That's just, really great to have. And then just opportunities to shoot. There's something, it was like, and a lot of that's like what you make of it. I mean, I don't
Hmm.
know. I'm sure all these programs are kind of the same to a degree, but like if you wanted to, you could go through, I think, any of them really and not get as much hands-on kind of experience as you would want. But if
Hmm.
you, push for it, you can. Like for me, it was
Right.
like, hey, you have a directing assignment that you need to do. Do you want me to shoot that for you? Like it's
Right.
not technically my class, but it was like, as soon as people were doing those projects, let me get on them, let me do whatever I could. And then same thing once you get to like thesis films, I think I shot like 4 or 5 or something. It was just
Oh
like,
wow.
I
Yeah.
was just getting in the reps. It was just doing, and they were all different. Like I think literally each one of them was like a different. There was like a horror one. There was one that was just kind of more of a drama. One was kind of like something almost like Her, kind of like a sci-fi, but not
Hmm.
like hard sci-fi. Um, yeah, it was just like pretty much and then I did that kind of on purpose too. It was like, well,
Hmm.
one, it's just finding good collaborators and good scripts, but also it was like, hey, let's like try something in each one of these.
Right.
So I think that was really the best part of it, was just getting in the reps, really just being on set as much
Yeah.
as possible, which is
Yeah.
my favorite part. Like to me, being
Right.
on set, that's another reason why cinematography. I was like, you get to do that, the most. Like as a director, for me, it's like it was always about like getting to focus on the visuals and being on set. When you're young, you don't understand like, oh, well, that's just the director of photography. Like that's
Right.
what I wanted to do the whole time. You just, when you're a kid, you don't understand. You just think, oh, the director, they make the movie.
Yeah. There's
So,
literally in your mind as a kid, you're like, there's the director and the actors, and
yeah,
that's
no, yeah,
100% it. And there's
yeah.
so many other pieces. Getting started in the career side. I mean, you've done a ton with like shorts and music videos and
Mhm.
commercials and things. Um, when's the first time getting out of film school that you worked on a project and went, this is incredibly like, this is it. This is what I've been working for. Like, this feels incredibly artistically fulfilling. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, when's the first time
Yeah,
you remember having that feeling of like, oh, I'm a professional now. I'm doing this now.
sure. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel pretty lucky on every project, really. I mean, I guess like the first feature is obviously that was always like the thing, right? Like when you're a
Mhm.
kid, you're like, I love watching movies. I want to make movies.
Yeah.
And I love doing shorts and commercials and all these different things. Um, but yeah, for me, getting to work on features is definitely, kind of my favorite part of it. Like it's, getting to work with people on something that's long enough where you can really develop the
Yeah.
relationship, and like the experience grows, and it feels like it takes a life of its own, but it's really just everybody syncing up creatively and understanding what you're doing, and it just creates this kind of engine that just
Sure.
it kind of feels great when it's working so well.
Yeah, that's
But
awesome.
yeah, I think the first feature was probably the one where I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is has been the goal for many years. Like
Right, right.
that was nice that it was happening.
Well, you mentioned trying so many different genres in school, and I'm very curious to know the answer to this question because it'll definitely affect the conversation regarding the rest of this. You mentioned you did like horror, sci-fi, a drama. Did you have certain genres that you were drawn to and wanting to work in? I know obviously it's exciting to dip your toe in everything, but like,
Yeah.
did you enjoy horror? Did you enjoy sci-fi? Like, were you going, I want to work on a Western really bad? You know, like what
Mhm.
was kind of your leaning um, when you were thinking about what kind of projects you wanted to work on?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I really do love pretty much every genre, and that's I like the variety of getting to
Mhm.
work in so many different genres. Like me when I was a kid and first discovering, kind of cinema in a deeper way, I would literally just go to like Blockbuster or Hollywood Video and be like, all right, for a while I'm just gonna do like the Western section and just go through and was like cataloging almost just like making my way through. And I was like, all right, now let's do action cinema and then go through that and then international cinema. And so, I mean, I've always had a pretty broad, like like in the same day, I'll watch like a Tarkovsky movie and then I'll go watch The Raid, like that's,
Right.
I don't know. They all work for me. And so it's kind of the same way. Like I would love to go make something that is like this on the level. I mean, Tarkovsky is like a master, but to go make projects like that and then, go shoot like a John Wick or Raid or something would be amazing. Like I would love to go shoot a crazy action movie as well.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I really like all of them. Like to me, that's the challenge is fun, and I like adapting to what any project is. Like to me, my whole thing is that I should come in and not force my style on something, but let
Mm.
the movie tell me how to adapt around it. And so the genres really let you kind of play even more with that and find ways to kind of change how you think about working and what you think about, how you think lighting should work or framing or
Mm.
that stuff. To me, it just helps you learn and kind of like push yourself every time you're trying something so different.
Right. Right. I want to ask about that because that's something that's always interesting is like every cinematographer has their own style. You know, like when you watch a Roger Deakins movie,
Well, yeah.
you know, if you don't know it's him, you start
Hmm.
going, I think this is a Deakins movie, you know,
Yeah.
or if you're whoever you want to fill in the blank with any cinematographer, like when you start watching a movie, you can kind of see that's their style. But like you said,
Yeah.
it can't overtake the movie. You know, so
Hmm.
you have collaborators, you know, like Spielberg and his cinematographer have worked together. He had
Hmm.
first half of his career with one, second half with the other. Like you can
Yeah.
tell that distinct style. What do you think? I've asked a couple different creatives this, like, what do you think is the balance of bringing your style and your tone and your I guess visual trademarks or look to a film? Because that's obviously why you got hired, is because you provide a certain aesthetic or look they liked.
Yeah.
Like, where's that balance of delivering that, but also like being invisible? Like, where
Yeah.
does that kind of rest?
I don't know. I think that's like the thing that I'll just be
Trying to
working on
figure out
for
forever.
forever. Yeah. I mean, to me, that's probably part of the thing, right? Like, I don't know that ever gets answered. I mean, it's tricky for me when if people ask like, "Oh, what's your style?" I honestly like don't know what that
Hmm.
answer is. I'm sure. I think it's easier if someone were to tell me, like, "Hey, watch all my stuff." I'm sure you can tell me like what
Yeah.
it is. I'm sure they're in there. I mean, like, there's definitely like lens choices I lean towards. It doesn't mean that that's what I force on a project, but
Hmm.
like, it's everyone has their own taste, right? And so it's all about like, oh, like my taste syncs up this director, and so that's probably why we're gonna be able to get along and work well together. Um, so I don't know. I mean, like I have my penchant for certain things, but I really do try. I mean, that's like one of my favorite things is like prepping, and I like to prep as much as possible, as fast as possible on a project. It's pretty much as soon as I'm on board, I'm like already prepping, even if we haven't
Right.
officially
Yeah.
started prep yet. Because for me, what I like to do is like calibrate myself to the movie. So like it's like references, diagrams, making
Mhm.
all these things, shot lists, and then like even when they're done, I'm just kind of like going over them again. And sometimes it's not even to change anything or to update anything, but to just kind of like burn it into my brain. I'm just like trying to calibrate myself so that when we walk on set, if I'm going to change anything or if anything's going to just, all the things that pop up on the day, I need my brain to work in the way of the movie so that I make
Right.
the correct choice that fits the movie and not what my instincts would be. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
really try to do that as much as possible, but I'm sure there's things that people would be like, oh yeah, when I watch all your movies, you also tend to do this or that.
Right.
I'm sure they're in there. I mean, someone like Deakins, I mean, he's definitely like one of my favorites. Obviously, I mean,
It has to
everyone
be.
loves
I
him.
mean,
He's
like
a
if he's
master.
not in your three for like every cinematographer, it's like there he
Yeah, I
is.
mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, he definitely has his things, and they've also changed with him over time. I feel like I mean, he was always into trying to use practicals and motivate from practicals, but now with digital cameras, he's like pushing that even harder and just being like, yeah, this is all practicals. Like we're barely, they might be modifying all of them and adding all of them,
Mhm.
but so yeah, even he's changing. But yeah, he has his things he tends towards, but
Right.
it's pretty. I think we know because we're looking and we're watching, but I think
Sure.
it's pretty invisible to
To
a
the
lot of people.
yeah, to someone who's just watching the movie.
Yeah,
um yeah, I want to talk about Malum here in just a second. Because
yeah, yeah.
I have lots of questions about that. But I gotta ask you, you mentioned like lens preferences, and I
Hmm.
was just had a long one-sided nerdy conversation with my wife. I'm sure she didn't enjoy it. But we were
That sounds
watching
familiar.
right. We were watching Mission Impossible 2, which is not a
Hmm.
great movie.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I mean, if you
but
just want to talk about Mission Impossible, I could do it. But sorry, go ahead.
yeah, we just started going back through them because well, I that's what I do is like I always find excuses like this new one's coming out, so now we have to rewatch like
Hmm.
and any excuse to go back to De Palma's first one is like yeah,
Yes.
let's go.
Yes.
Um so we started watching through them. We get to Mission Impossible 2. Like I was almost like, you know, we could just watch the motorcycle chase and then be done,
Yeah.
But ended up watching the movie. And one of the things I really liked about it is it's from early 2000s, like, and it has a lot of that, teal and orange, like super telephoto lens, like way back. You've got all these
Yeah.
compressed images. And I was like, this is actually a really cool looking movie. Like, which I think was the goal is just like, how do we make this super cool? And yeah, dude,
Yeah.
like explosions. And I was seeing that, I was going like, man, it seems like the telephoto lens situation has really gone away in the last couple of years.
Hmm.
Like everything I've watched recently has been, you know, kind of that Kubrick style, really wide. Let's show the
Hmm.
full environment. The people, like even close-ups now are like wide angle lenses because it distorts their face in a weird way. Like you watch The
Hmm.
Lighthouse or whatever movie you want to
Yeah.
throw in. Um, and I was telling her, I was like, I kind of miss this look. Like I miss the Michael
Hmm.
Bay early 2000s, like the really compressed but huge images. Um,
Yeah.
when you talk like lens preferences, like what's kind of the style that you really enjoy, like when you're watching something like, oh, I love that aesthetic, and that you try to bring into projects if you can. Like I know obviously you want to fit
Sure.
the movie,
Sure.
but if you're like, man, if they let me shoot it this way, like I'm always going to whip out this lens or this style.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I tend towards like wider lenses, not necessarily like, you know, fisheye, like 10 millimeter in
Right.
someone's face all the time. But to me, there's like a little more presence that you get. You feel like
Mm,
you're there and you're with everybody if you just have a wider lens in general. Like to me, it brings you in,
yeah.
which is a little weird, right? Because in some ways you would
You're
think that
further
the
away.
longer lens would be,
Yeah.
but to me, it's like you're saying that makes it feel more flat, more like a
Mm,
photograph. Whereas like on a wider lens and even closer to people, if you balance it right, so yeah, you aren't just distorting. I don't know, you just feel like you're like there, you're in it.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, that is what I tend towards, but like for the right project, then and again, it's not like I'm always like, hey, we should always just shoot on wide lenses.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but uh, but yeah, that would just be like my natural tendency. But the thing is, like, and my thing with lenses too is I usually try to pick, and also just kind of starts to happen in the movie based on your locations and what's happening. I usually end up shooting like most of a movie on like about like three lenses for like
Mhm.
60 to 70% of it, maybe. And then, then you feel the difference when suddenly you are on a long lens or, oh, we've been on long lenses the whole time and now we're on a big
Yeah.
wide lens. Like
It's a
to
choice
me,
for
that,
this shot, where it
yeah, it makes you
changes.
like feel something. And so that's a big thing for me is just determining like, oh, what is our kind of like, what feels like our standard way that we're like seeing this, even if we are shifting between angles, like, you build a language that people are used to, and then you can like break that rule or stick to
Mm.
that rule, and all of that means something. I do like setting up rules to a degree, whether it be for
Mm.
lighting or camera work or framing or movement. And then so we can build that language, and then we can, really say something if we break it or change it over the movie. Like, oh, the rules are this, and then as the movie goes on, and hopefully,
Mm.
and it's usually trying to be all like subtle things that you don't really notice,
Right.
obviously, but subconsciously, hopefully they're doing their work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to talk about your latest project, Malum, which
Mhm.
I'm really excited to check it out. And Last Shift is a movie that, I mean, has just developed a huge cult following over time. And I think partially just because it sits in the Netflix queue with this really creepy image, and everybody at
It's
some
such a
point,
great.
goes, it's 2 a.m. and I want to watch a scary movie. What's that creepy movie right here? And they watch it. Like I watched it. I had never seen a trailer for it. Like I just literally
Mhm.
clicked it and was like, this looks kind of weird.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the way to go into it, honestly, is just going in blind. First and foremost, were you familiar with Last Shift at all, prior to, getting connected to this movie? And then once okay, this is a movie that's developed a bit of a cult following. It's known for being like having really cool visuals. Like,
Mhm.
did you feel intimidated at all stepping into it versus stepping into something that, nobody knows anything about the project?
Sure. Yeah, that's funny. I actually thought about the second part, so I guess not. But yes, I was a fan.
Now the panic sets in slowly.
Yeah,
No,
oh
no, just
geez. I mean, I definitely am feeling it now because you see people like comment on trailers and stuff, and
don't read those.
there are people
My
who I know
advice:
you like
don't read the comments.
you scroll through a little bit. You just want to see. I'm always curious how like it plays for people and stuff. Especially this one because it's just so fun. Like it's such a fun ride, so I'm always curious how people feel about that. But yeah, so I had seen the first one. I was a fan, and but I remember like as soon as kind of Anthony had told me I'd heard about it before things were kind of like locked in. I was like, oh, we're doing kind of a reimagining and
Mhm.
really taking things even further, going kind of bigger and everything story, effects, scares. And I was like, well, that sounds cool. Like, I mean, I don't, I mean, I get it when people are like, oh, remake, why are you doing this
Mhm.
remake? But to me, and they kind of came up with this reimagining term, and I actually think it does fit. It was like, oh, that was a good idea to bring a different term to this because, um, I don't know, it really expanded on a lot of the stuff that I was like, oh, I would want to see more about that, like more about the cults, more of like an investigation
Mhm.
element. Talking about all the genre stuff, like I'm definitely a big sucker for kind of noir and any of those, like, All the President's Men, like any of these, like, or Parallax View, anything where someone's like, there's like conspiracies or cult stuff, people are looking into things, going through paperwork, looking at computers, like
Yeah.
for
Right.
some reason, just investigation in cinema really works for me. So I was like, oh, if you want to take that and then combine that with like a really crazy horror movie, that sounds pretty great to
Mm.
me. Um, and so that added element really, I thought, kind of boosted it and kind of justified like, oh yeah, that's why you should,
Yeah.
give this another go. And audiences, like you were saying, like that movie. I mean, I think people were into it, and it did get some good viewership at the time, but I think it didn't get as wide a release as
Yeah.
really it deserved. And so this is just another way to like kind of bring it to people, because it's been a little while. I think it's been almost 10 years. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
7 or 8, I
it's
think.
yeah, just a nice way to bring it to a new audience. And the nice thing is you can get both. Like I think I like both of them. Like I would still watch either. So it doesn't, it's not like it's saying, oh, like that first one was bad or anything.
Right.
It's just like, hey, honestly, it's, hey, that movie was still great. And they had stuff that, you couldn't quite do in your time and your budget. And it's like, so
Yeah.
let's take the opportunity to do that more stuff. So,
Yeah. I'm a big fan of seeing creators get just a little bit more money, a little bit more time,
yeah.
and get to do something bigger. And one of the first questions that was just rolling through my mind all morning thinking about this was like, how much of this is remake versus reimagining versus new direction? Because
Mhm.
watching the trailer, it's like we already know here's the premise, and
Yeah.
then it seems like just bigger. Like there's other locations besides,
Hmm.
at least in the trailer, there's a few other locations besides the police station. Like there's more people in certain
Hmm.
scenes, more extra. Like it
Yeah.
just seems a little bit bigger. And and I think we kind of saw that even like Damon Leone with Terrifier. Like you see
Mm.
him do something with a micro budget, and then you see Terrifier 2, which is in many ways you could go into it without having seen the first, and you've got this crazy huge movie, which how they
Hmm.
shot that for $250,000 I don't understand. And it seems like this is kind of the same vibe. It's like here it's a little bit bigger, a little bit better.
Hmm.
Going into it with it being a reimagining of sorts, how much were you revisiting Last Shift to look at the visual style of that versus sitting down with Anthony and going, okay, clean slate. This is the premise. Let's build this from scratch, from the ground up. Like, how much was going back to the known visuals versus creating completely new visuals?
Yeah. Yeah. So I did do a few rewatches, like not before we were actually prepping or shooting, but just kind of right around the time that Anthony said they were working on it. And then I actually kind of purposefully, like, I don't think I'm going to watch it for a little while.
Don't want to just be
Just to
photocopying
like,
scenes. Right.
yeah, because I think, and Anthony, when we sat down, that I mean, I don't know that we ever really, we talked about it more when he kind of told me he was like working on it in the initial phase and kind of still like writing before I'd read anything. And that's when we would talk about the first movie. And then once I read the script for this one, we kind of it never really went back to it.
Mm.
And that was really just because it did feel like a different movie. Like to me, reading this one, I had so many kind of new things to think about visually that even before we found locations, that I was like, I don't know, I just had a lot to key in on that was so different that there wasn't really, I don't know, like any reason to go back. It didn't feel, it's like it has the same premise. And there's like a few scenes I would say that it's kind of like, hey, if you know the first movie, this is us like doing it again, but like messing with it. Um, but other than that, like it's pretty much its own thing. Like the vibe overall feels different, and then it gets pretty wild. I don't think people are quite ready for where it goes.
Yeah, I
Towards the
saw
back half.
I saw someone's review and they said there's a lot more gore, which I thought was interesting. I think they actually
Yeah.
said it was circling back to Terrifiers. They said it was like Terrifier 2 level gore, and I was like, what? That seems
It
I don't foresee that,
Yeah,
but
this
was that
movie goes hard. That's one of the things I liked about it in the script. It it just has great momentum. Like that was the thing. Like I read the script so fast. Like it just read really fast. Because you just were like wanting to. You're like, yep, next thing, let's go, let's go, let's
Mhm.
go. It just doesn't feel like it has any breaks. And then yeah, like pretty quickly, it's not one of the. I mean, I like a lot of horror, but there a lot of it also can do that thing where it's like you just like wait around and nothing's happening, and then it's like,
Mhm.
hey, let me give you like 15 minutes of crazy stuff at the end.
Right.
And this movie does not do that. This movie gets to it quick and just keeps upping, which I really enjoyed. I'm like, hey, let's do it. Like that's what we're here to do. I mean, in our schedule, pretty quickly we got to the point where we're like, oh, like we've already shot all the days that don't have stunts or special effects
Mm.
makeup. So that's all we have for like the whole rest. Is like every day we're gonna have to do one of these things or both of
Saran
these
wrap the
things.
camera for this section.
Yeah, there was lots of baguettes and things going on.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, that was great, and that's what was fun about it. And the big thing too is the stations. Like the first movie has a very different kind of station, and ours is very
Mm.
different from that one. And I think they made like great choices. That's why that first one looks good. Like it fits the look of that station, has this desaturated kind of high key, but you've got the white walls and everything. The whole station kind of looks the same too, so it kind of makes sense. Like let's build a very distinct look that is set. And then our station was just this really weird building that was like 4 stories. And we had actually had to try to make it look smaller. It was one of our big things that we had to do when we walked in because we're like, this is too big. Um, but it has so many different looks. There's like areas that do have that same like cinder
Mhm.
block kind of thing, but we're not there too often. And then there's areas that have like green tile that looks like it's from like the Shining bathroom. Like it was just had, there's areas that had like wood everywhere on the walls, which you see a tiny bit where we kind of stayed away from those. But yeah, we just had like so much variety that was like, oh, like even if we had sat down and been like, do we want to reference the first movie visually, there really wouldn't have been a way to do it because it just
Yeah.
looked
With how
so different.
claustrophobic that first one is. Like, because the
Yeah.
that whole movie has the haunted house feel. Like I'm in this narrow hallway. I'm in this small
Hmm.
room,
Yeah.
and yeah. You mentioned shooting with like the practical effects, stunts,
Hmm.
things like that, which it seems has been amped up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Did you? How is that collaboration? I guess with the teams doing makeup effects, because that's something I've interviewed a couple of people who do like practical effects and things,
Hmm.
um and that's one of the things they talk about is like whoever's shooting it really matters because you can start
Hmm.
seeing the seams really quickly. Like how much of a learning
Yeah.
curve was that? Because I can't imagine anything else you've worked on to this point has had a lot of that. So like was that a steep learning curve?
Um, no, I mean, I've done a few projects that had stuff that was similar.
Hmm,
It was really just that it was like the volume, I guess. Like I've
right.
worked with prosthetics and things like that, and people in big suits
Gotcha.
um and things like that. But this was really just volume. Like it was a lot.
10 gallons of
Like I said,
blood instead of
yeah,
1 gallon of
and
blood.
just like how much it was like literally, I think after our first week, we were just like, there's something every day.
Hmm.
And you want to take your time and make that stuff, look great and do it right. And so, and then when you're doing that stuff, you still have to get performance. It's not even just about, the makeup effect. There's also, you're probably shooting someone responding to it or someone in it who needs to do the
Right.
work as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, all that stuff, it's really just about like time and being prepared. Like that's, it's just having meetings ahead of time, knowing how things are going to work, how long it takes for things to get applied, if there's changes, clean up, all that stuff. So yeah, it's just really about like your due diligence and prep.
No.
And like I said, I just love prepping as much as possible. And we were there for about like a month beforehand, me
Oh
and
wow.
Anthony, a lot of the other keys, in Kentucky on location prepping. And that was super helpful. Like that's,
Yeah. That's a
that's
lot of
key.
time to get, which is pretty cool.
It
Um,
was, yeah, yeah. It was necessary though. We used all of it for
yeah.
sure.
What was that location before? Because it wasn't, I mean, obviously it wasn't a police station. Like what was that building
Oh, it
prior?
is. Is it?
Oh, it was
Is
a
it
former police station.
decommissioned? Yeah, yeah. So,
Okay.
they were getting ready to knock it down. No one had been in there since
You're,
when
you're going,
COVID
wait,
started.
this is the movie. We're
Yeah,
the
no, I
last
mean
shift
that's
here. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think when they found that location, they found it before I was like officially on board, and it was just like, okay, here we go. We got to go. Like we got to
Before
kick
it's
it into
gone.
gear
Yeah.
because they want to demolish this place. And
Hmm.
so yeah, no, it was wild. It has, like I said, 4 stories, has this like interesting basement level. The whole top level is like an actual like not like a full prison, but it has holding
Cells. And,
cells
yeah.
kind of set up for that, and then it had a gymnasium, like a full gymnasium in there as well, which was interesting. Which we kind of turned, and we shoot in there a little, and there's a little bit. It's almost became like a soundstage for us. You could build your sets in there.
Yeah.
Um, so it really provided a lot of the opportunity for us, and yeah, it really was. It was like, oh, this is it. This is the perfect spot. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's great.
You love prep. I've gotten that loud and
Mhm.
clear. You love prep. Prep is your
Yeah, all
favorite.
the all
Uh,
the prep.
um,
It's not well. You hit a point where you're like, it happens. Like towards the end of prep, I'm like, I'm just so ready to get on. Like, let's just start and do it.
yeah,
Um, but then there's still always more time where you're like, I don't know, we can go over more. We can make,
yeah. You're prepared to improvise. Basically, it sounds like
mhm.
it's if I go knowing this is frontward and backwards. This is what I can do. It gives you that
Yeah,
freedom where it's like, oh, the light looks really cool through these bars, or this looks really sweet in this room. Um,
yeah,
you mentioned kind of putting the original out of your mind a little bit, but you mentioned
mhm,
like you love looking through, like making diagrams and looking through other films. What were
yeah.
like maybe the 2 or 3 movies that you feel like you watched or looked at that influenced kind of your style looking at this project? Because when I talk to someone like Elliot Rocket with X, it's like obviously there's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but there's also Easy Rider, and like there's these other movies you would never
Hmm.
think of. What were kind of your
Sure.
biggest influences or films you kept referencing?
Yeah. Anthony and I talked a lot about like Sinister,
Hmm,
and the Evil Dead remake, the Fede Alvarez,
gotcha. Why the
especially with a lot
remake
of the
specifically?
I think because the horror is really for the horror moments. That movie, it get like this one kind of it goes hard, and it's like
Right.
pretty brutal and intense. And so that was kind of what we were picking from there, was just really talking about how to really make that stuff feel intense and visceral. Um, and it had been a while since I had watched it, and I remember those moments being pretty impactful. And then like watching those scenes again, I was like, oh yeah, this movie is like pretty great in those moments when they like the stuff in the bathroom with the needle and the eye, and
Yeah.
it's a lot. So yeah, that was definitely an influence there for me for lighting. Like Darius Kanji's work in Seven, of course. Like
Mm.
you're working, I feel like, on anything in fluorescence and in a police station, it's pretty hard not to want to take a look again at that. And flashlights too. And then speaking of Deacons, Prisoners was definitely one for
Mm.
lighting as well. Especially for exteriors, the way he just went all off practicals, no,
No.
no moonlight, and just it just kind of fit, I think, for what we were doing as well. So it's always good to have a good excuse to watch Prisoners again.
Right. Yeah. No, I love the shot in the trailer, like going through the city where you've got like the red and blue lights flashing on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And funny story, Evil Dead, the remake was the first movie I ever saw in theaters.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so I grew up like super religious background, was not allowed to go to movies
Mm-hmm.
at all. And when I turned 18 in 2013 when that came out, and that was literally like I think it came out in like April. My birthday was in March, so like the day I turned 18, I was like, see you guys, I'm going to go see Evil Dead. It was like a packed theater, and like all those moments, like grabbing the lid off the toilet and like smash, like the reactions
Yeah.
of the packed theater, people that probably didn't expect, like didn't know what Evil Dead was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that
Wow,
excites me that that's a reference point.
that's quite a turn to be like,
You
can't
can't go to the
go quite
movies.
a yeah, quite a first movie
So
to go to. Yeah, I
what's
mean, so we had the premiere last night, which was really fun to see it, with the full house, and yeah, it was really great to get to see everyone's reactions to everything. It's yeah, similar. It's like watching people who, you see it so many times, and then so it's great to
right.
don't know what's coming.
Going into a premiere and showing a room full of people you work, like how sweaty are your hands going into a theater like that, watching, like
Yeah.
were you going, is there a split second emotionally where you're like, what if everyone hates this? And then when you start seeing people scream or start seeing people laugh at something that they should be laughing at, or you start seeing
Mhm.
people like really sucked in, like um how does that feel, like seeing something you've created get shown on this level and with this much buzz and excitement about it?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really fun. I mean, for me, I love just doing the work. And so ultimately, if it really came down to it, that I just made stuff and no one saw it, I'd honestly think still be okay. Like,
Right.
but it's like so great when you make it and you're like, oh, people actually like it. That's awesome. That is ultimately why we're doing it, is to make something for people to be entertained and have a good time. And I mean, for me, my big thing is just I go into a premiere or any screening, I'm like, oh, I'm curious to see what the projection's like. And,
Mm.
it everything looks so different on every format that,
Yeah.
you're in the grade and you try to make it the best quality for the best viewing scenario, and then no one will ever probably actually see it that way.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually did projection way, way back in the day when it was still film. So I don't know, I'm like extra picky about that stuff. So
Sure.
that's always my main thing going in, is like what's the projection going to be like?
Mhm.
It was pretty good, but yeah, but it's great when like it kicks in, and you can just tell when you're in a room watching it with people, even for like test screenings, or when you're just showing it to a couple people, a cut or something. It's just so different sitting in a room with people, even if it is like two people versus when it's just you at a computer screen.
Right. Yeah.
um, and so you can tell pretty quickly, which is kind of nice because you can be like, okay, let's just get it out of the way. Either they're into it or they're not.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but yeah, it was great. It was nice that you could tell pretty fast. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
people are on board. This is doing what they want. So
It's
yeah,
awesome.
it's
That's
nice.
awesome. Well, yeah, I'm excited to check it out. I think it's everything you're saying is like music to my ears. It's like we're referencing Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead, and
Yeah.
it's there's so much that stands out. One of the things you obviously about Last Shift is it found its life on streaming
Hmm.
largely. I don't even remember if it did come out theatrically. I don't remember it doing it, and I think that would be most people's reaction. But on streaming,
Hmm.
obviously, found a huge life of its own. Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned format. As a cinematographer, you're going through and you're shooting knowing like a select group of people are going to watch this on the big screen. Even if that's a large select group of
Mhm.
people, it's a select group of people
Yeah.
are going to see it on the screen. The majority are going to see it on Netflix, Hulu, Shutter, wherever its
Hmm.
final place is that it sits.
Yeah.
Um, as you're shooting, are you thinking about those other formats? Because I know that's a big headache for like sound designers, where it's like, man, I
Yeah.
did this Dolby surround sound, mix
Yeah.
for this, and it's going to be watched on iPhone somewhere. Like,
Hmm.
is that affecting decisions you're making as you're shooting, or is it just purely like I'm shooting for theatrical, the way it needs to be seen? Here it is.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know. It's weird. I don't think too much about format when I'm shooting. Like it really is just what feels right to tell the story.
Mhm.
And I guess, I mean, the weird thing is when you're shooting, you're shooting, most directors, you're looking at like a 17-inch
You're shooting this
monitor.
big anyway, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or yeah, I mean, if you're on a handheld one, you got like a 7-inch probably. And I will actually, because I was operating on this, and I do tend to like operating quite a bit. I will sometimes actually pop over to the village and take a look at a larger monitor just to kind of like remind yourself, because looking through an eyepiece or a little 5-inch on the camera, sometimes you can kind of forget to like think big, right? Because you are looking at something
Yeah.
smaller. Um, so yeah, I mean, it is something that is on my mind to kind of remind yourself. But I mean, ultimately, when we're shooting it, it is kind of on a TV
Right.
that you're
Right.
watching. So I guess that is kind of the scale. But I don't think I ever really have made a choice to be like, oh, this shot will look better on the big screen, but it might not work on
Yeah.
on at home or something. Hopefully, it's just about like feeling what's right in the moment, no matter where you are. I mean, for me, framing is less of a concern between formats, and it's honestly just more like shifts in luminance and contrast
Yeah.
levels and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully people will watch it eventually on like the 4K HDR, like Blu-ray. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Because that's like, watching it in HDR. I really liked that
Hmm.
color pass on it. And the SDR looks great too, but now that I like upgraded a few years back and I've got like an OLED and watching everything in HDR, going and watching things in Dolby, it's like those contrast levels are just so
Yeah.
great, such rich,
And important for a
shadows.
movie like that. Yeah. It's like
Yes,
if your
yeah,
contrast is off, it can do some damage to a horror movie for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. But
So
that's the nice thing is that we did like an HDR pass and an SDR as well. So like they both, yeah, it translates very nicely.
beautiful.
So yeah, it was nice to see. It's good projection, and yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna check it out this weekend too. I want to go see it in like the one of the theaters that I go to all the time because I feel like I kind of know their
Yeah.
projection. So I'm gonna go see how their stuff's looking.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, I have a couple questions to ask everybody at the end of the show just to get everyone's input on it, and always curious by the
cool.
variety of answers. What do you think is the best decade of film history?
That's really
That's
tough.
always the response is
Um,
always, okay, I'm out. I can't do this.
yeah, I honestly don't know. I mean, that's the same thing. Like someone asks, like, "What's your favorite movie?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like, which genre, which director? I don't like. That's tough. I mean, so a year that always comes back to me, and it's not a decade, but is it 2007? We got
Hmm.
Assassination of Jesse James and There Will Be Blood in the same year,
Hmm.
and No Country for Old Men. So
Yeah.
like those three movies, I think are just so great, and they're movies that I watch all the time. Um, I don't know if that's the best decade. I can't remember. I'm also really bad with dates for movies. That's my one movie trivia thing that I'm like
That's a
not as great
solid
with.
year. That's a
But
solid
yeah,
year for sure.
so I guess maybe the 2000s. I'm sure there was other good stuff in there too. But that year, like that's one of those years that always sticks out to me. And I'm like, how did we get all three of those movies in the same year?
If you were given the green light to remake any film or reimagine any film,
Mm,
what would you choose and why?
oof. That's also a tough one. Oh no. Interesting. A buddy of mine, who's also he's a great director who I work with a lot. We're both big fans of Seijun Suzuki, who made like there's this movie Tokyo Drifter.
Mm,
It's from like the '60s. He's not quite as well known as I think he should be, Seijun Suzuki, but he made these pretty wild. I mean, he made so many movies back in the kind of studio days where they would like make a movie every 2 weeks or something. Like it was
right.
pretty wild. And it's got just such a cool style, like these kind of sets and matte paintings and things that, kind of look like a set, but they kind of lean into it and it feels purposeful. And I think there's something, that you could do really cool with really any of his movies. So yeah, maybe one of his would be fun to do. Also, because like I feel like people don't know them as well. So
Yeah, I just added it to my list to check out.
yeah, it's cool. I think it's on Criterion, like a bunch of his stuff. Yeah.
Cool. Um, I was going to ask what's a movie your diehard fans would be surprised you enjoy, but you enjoy everything.
Mm,
So
I
you're
know.
pretty
Yeah,
eclectic. So I'm gonna I'll just jump
that's
over it.
that's a tough one.
um, who do you think is the most underrated artist working today?
Ooh, these are tough.
I know they don't get easier; they just get progressively harder. And then you go,
yeah, most underrated art. I don't know. I'm worried I'm gonna
there's so many names to leave off
seriously.
the table. You know,
I know. Hmm. I mean, also just my brain, like, I mean, that's why I like use something like Letterbox to like just track what I've been watching and things because
yeah,
wait, what did I watch last week? I'll remember the details of the movie, but I like won't remember that I watched it last week. Um, Most underrated working today. The problem is that like there's some people that I like in my mind I don't think of them as underrated, but I feel like people just don't know them.
hmm.
So like the director Korida, who just did Broker that came out
Hmm.
recently. I feel like no one talked about Broker. Um, and his movies are just really great,
Hmm.
very small human stories that are just really beautiful and just really well told all around, like really great cinema that I think you could easily like miss the craft because it is so it doesn't draw any attention to itself.
Hmm.
So Broker this year, I feel like this was like such a good year, honestly. It was kind of like looking back on it, I was like, man, we had like I feel like there's a lot of stuff this year that's going to be kind of classics that we'll talk about, and you don't always get that every year.
Right.
Um, so yeah, but the thing is, like I feel like there's people who know Correa like very well. But my guess would be that maybe not as widely known. So yeah, go check
Right.
out
Huh.
any of his stuff.
Added to my list.
Yeah,
Um,
you can't go wrong with any of his movies. They're so good.
cool. Cool. I'll check it out.
Oh, and actually, sorry, there's another. This is I don't actually know. I think this is the first time director. There's a movie called Return to Seoul that
Hmm.
came out this year. That is pretty amazing, and I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure this is the director's first movie.
Hmm.
Um, and that one kind of blew me away. And also, again, I think in like some critic circles was talked about, but
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people missed. And I think it was just out pretty recently, so it might still be pretty easy to see.
Cool. Cool. Added to my list. I've got three I'm going to check
Yeah,
out from this.
yeah,
Which
really
is why I
good.
love these questions. The second to last question, which of your films do you think is the best representation of you as a creator? Um, is there a short that stands out? Is it Malum? Is it something that's yet to be seen? What do you think is the best representation of your work?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's probably always just the last thing I did.
Mm.
'Cause I just feel like, hopefully you're kind of growing and getting better and figuring out new tricks every time. So, yeah, probably right now, Malum, and then whatever I do next, it'll be that. Hopefully, hopefully I'm just up in the game each time. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Last question. What is the best piece of advice you would give to an aspiring filmmaker who is listening to this? always say there's no pressure. This could change someone's life
Yeah,
completely.
yeah.
They're going to say, this is the interview. I heard this statement. It changed my entire trajectory of my life. So what's that advice? What's the life-changing advice for someone aspiring to be a filmmaker?
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I mean, for me, I just like I try to my the way I pick projects is a combination of, liking the material, but also the people you work with. And
Hmm.
I work with a lot of the same directors repeatedly. A lot of my crew I've been working with for years and years and years, and those people become your friends, and or are already were your friends, and then they become your kind of coworkers. And to me, that's like the best thing is building that community of people. Like it really doesn't get much better than like being on set with people who you care about and are making something that's, really fulfilling, and you're working such long days, like,
Yeah.
and spending so much time with these people. They
Better
better
like
be,
them.
people. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it just feels like it feels like you're cheating almost somehow in life if you get
Mhm.
to, get to do something you like and then have great people around you. So I
Yeah.
guess that would be, yeah, just like find your people you like to work with, and make sure you get to keep doing fun things with them, because that's what it is. It's like easy to, I think, to get caught up in the goal of like hitting certain things, or you want to make this or do that, and like there'll always be that next thing. So like
Mhm.
try to like remember to be present, and the opportunities you're getting to have now with the people you're working with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I know, obviously Malum is out in theaters, the 31st.
yeah.
That's when it drops in theaters. I'm gonna try to rush this episode out so it's out tomorrow morning, so it's ready, so
Oh,
people
cool.
can go check it out.
Yeah.
And really really excited to check it out myself, and see all these different inspirations, influences. Um, is there anywhere people can connect with you, kind of keep track of what you're working on, or do you have any social accounts, anything else you want to make sure people connect with, just to kind of follow your journey and see what you're working on next?
Sure. Yeah. So my site is just seanmcdaniel.dp.com, and then I'm on Instagram, Sean M McDaniel. It's mostly just pictures like from me hiking and my cats and things like that. But there'll be, there's set photos, and I'll post stuff when, new projects have things going on when I'm allowed to. So
Awesome.
yeah, those are probably the best spots.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview and answering all these questions. I appreciate it. And look
Yeah.
forward to checking out all these recommendations. So I've got some watching to do.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, hopefully you'll have to let me know how you like them. There's some fun ones.
I'll hit you up for sure. So thank you so much. And for anybody listening, be sure to check out Malum in theaters, and yeah, connect with Sean on social. Check out those hiking pictures. And this is your reminder to watch 127 Hours, because that's the best hiking movie of all time.
Oh yeah, for sure.